Hello, hello. How are you doing today? What's new? How is everyone today? Figured we'd have our little chat. It's Friday evening. I don't often do them on Friday evening, but we're going to do them. We're going to do it. We're going to chat. We're going to have a conversation. It's just after dark here in New York City. My phone has already gone off twice to inform me that there is a curfew here in the city starting at 8 o'clock. It's dark outside. I'm sure people are out marching right now. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of our hearts go out to those people and their continued effort to raise awareness about the issue of police brutality, to challenge the political repression that's going to go on and has been going on, to challenge the continued, treatment of the black community, the rise of a police state. Absolutely, absolutely. Someone's asking if I have a TikTok, and the answer is yes. I just set one up. I do have a TikTok, Venya. And someone actually took a video of me and put it on there, so I retweeted it. So, yes, if you want to take video from here and put it on TikTok, go for it, right? I'm experimenting with TikTok. It's a new app. But folks, now is the time to hit the like button, to hit the subscribe button, to hit the notifications bell to make sure you get all of the notifications. And let's go. Let's do this. Let's jump into things. Let's get going. Let's get into motion. We're going to jump right into it. Folks, there are two things happening right now. If you look at the crisis in the country, there are two things taking place. Number one, there is a widespread rebellion against police brutality, racism, economic crisis, and the ongoing situation facing the country. That's happening. George Floyd was killed, and just like Baltimore went up in flames after the death of Freddie Gray, just like Ferguson went up in flames, just like there were protests all throughout the country in response to the killing of Trayvon Martin, just like you can go back to Los Angeles, you can go back to Watts in the 1960s. When people are oppressed, they fight back. As Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Revolution, says, where there is oppression, there is resistance. Where there is oppression, there is resistance. People fight back. And let's be real. The economic factor, the lack of jobs right now is adding fuel to the fire. The fact that we have a president who very much sees himself as a product of white backlash and sees himself as fighting against political correctness, fighting and trying to roll back the legacy of Barack Obama, the first black president, a president who has said many things on issues like law and order and police brutality that are not exactly friendly to the black community. That's adding to this as well. There are many factors adding to this. The fact that the younger generation of white Americans is far more sympathetic to the African American community and what they've been through. All of this has culminated amid the pandemic at a time when a lot of people are stuck at home, not many places to go, and this has all culminated into a big spontaneous explosion. That's what's happening. Number one, that is the first thing that's going on. There is a big spontaneous uprising taking place across the country, number one. Number two, it's very clear that there are forces within the power structure who see this as a big opportunity and that they think this will be a great opportunity to get rid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump represents one wing of the ruling class that's fighting another wing of the ruling class. And the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, that wing of the ruling class sees this as potentially something quite useful in removing the Donald and securing their control of the White House and the State Department once again. But let's be clear that the Donald Trump wing of the ruling class sees this as a big threat to them. They feel more under attack than they have been ever since this began. And folks, I'm going to say this. I called it, okay? And I'm not saying that, the point isn't that, okay, I'm just pointing this out, but I called it, all right? I called it. I said to you, if you were watching these lives, I said to you about a year ago that before the elections in November, there would probably be some kind of mass political uprising in the United States. I looked at the yellow vests and I said something like that's going to break out in the United States. It'll happen either right before, in the lead up to the elections, or it'll happen right after. But there's going to be another political explosion in the United States. Happened a little bit sooner than I thought, but I called it. And I'm not here to tell you that I'm, look at Caleb, the great divinator. The great divinator, he called it. Oh, bow before him and his magic crystal ball. Caleb predicted these events. If only we had listened to Caleb. That's not the point. That's not the point. That's not the point. That's not the point. That is not the point. It's not the point. It's not the point. It's not the point. Okay? It's not the point. The point is that I predicted it because I'm paying attention to trends that are going on. I pay attention to what's happening. I have an understanding of Marxism. I have an understanding of how human society and civilizations work. I was very involved in a lot of these protests. I was very involved in Occupy Wall Street. I was very involved in protests around Trayvon Martin. I was even involved up until, Baltimore stuff, and I'm going to tell that story later in this live. But I was involved in this stuff. I know how these things work, okay? I've seen all these things, and I know how they play out, and I saw this coming. I saw it coming. I didn't see that it would be the black community where it came from. I didn't see that it would be, I didn't see the pandemic coming. I didn't see that it would happen amid the pandemic. But, I knew something like this would happen. And, that's because I understand Marxism. That's because I understand Marxism, and I understand economics, and I understand class society. And if you can gain an understanding of that, you can predict these things as well. That's all I'm telling you, right? I mean, if you can come to study Marxism and dialectical materialism, I'm writing it down. Super chats are coming in. I'm writing them down. Will Trump declare martial law? Writing it down. I understand these things, and I can make these predictions, and you can understand them too. And not only can you make predictions, but you can figure out how to change the world if you can grasp the science of society. If you can grasp the science of society, you can predict these things. And I'm just being real with you all. That's what I'm trying to do on here. I am trying to teach you the science of society. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get you to understand Marxism. I'm trying to get you to understand dialectical materialism, scientific socialism. That's what I'm trying to do on these lives. And maybe you don't like it. Maybe you do like it. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing on these lives. And I'm having a good time doing it. Now, folks, one thing I wanted to point out. I mean, first of all, you all know I don't condone anything. I would never encourage anything illegal. I don't think that, looting and breaking the law is a good thing to do, okay? I'm not encouraging anyone to engage in that kind of activity. So don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. Okay? Just don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. I do not encourage anything illegal. But, the other night I was watching the live streams. I've been watching that. Every night I get on around this time and I watch the live streams of the people out in the streets. Watch what they're doing. Sometimes I retweet the live streams. And I saw the looting of Macy's. And I saw people going into Macy's on 34th Street in Manhattan. I often pass that area on the way to work. I haven't been going to work because I've been working from home because of the pandemic lately. But, I saw the area where people were breaking into Macy's, right? And I watched that and I thought, okay, Manhattan right now is a ghost town. It's a ghost town, right? That area of Manhattan is a ghost town. Very few people are rich enough to live there. Those who are tend to have homes upstate, so they're out of there. Macy's is closed because of the pandemic. Right? It's a big, huge department store, many floors. It's closed because of the pandemic. You can't go in. So as they're trashing Macy's, and the internet's full of people saying, oh, look at these criminals, how dare they? I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. Wait a minute. Hold up. Macy's cannot sell any of this stuff. Right? These items are sitting on the shelves. No one can come in and buy it. Number one. Number two, Macy's has insurance. Right? They have insurance for fires, disasters, riots, etc. So I thought for a minute and I said, wait a second. It looks to me like Macy's is probably going to make more money being looted than they would have made without the looting. Think about that. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, okay? I haven't checked. I didn't call Macy's. I'm not going to, am I wrong? And it occurred to me, I'm looking at this. I'm thinking, okay, Macy's, they're losing money. They're paying their rent. Their store is closed. All right? Someone says they've even filed for bankruptcy. They've got insurance. So Macy's is probably making more money by people breaking the door, going in and stealing stuff than they would have made if everyone had just stayed home or the protests had just been completely peaceful with no property damage. Macy's is probably making more money. Like, you have to wonder, like, if I was the CEO of Macy's, right? I mean, I'm not. But if I were the CEO of Macy's, would I have been out there and said, guys, can you damage the building a little bit more, please? I mean, I see you're stealing the stuff, but can you kind of break the window too? I mean, we want to get a payout on that. Think about it. Macy's is already, as someone says in the chat, is already going out of business. Macy's makes more money by having their store looted than not having their store looted. Now, obviously, does that mean I'm like a big fan? Yes, help that Macy's CEO. Go and loot the... That's not what I'm saying at all. Not what I'm saying at all. I'm looking at it, I'm just going, I'm looking at it and I'm going, wait a second. Isn't capitalism a crazy, crazy system? Think about it. Isn't capitalism a completely nuts and crazy system? When a store can make more money being looted and vandalized and having its property destroyed than just doing the responsible thing and shutting down because of a pandemic. This is nuts. This is nuts, and this whole situation in the country is nuts. This whole situation in the country is completely insane. It's completely nuts. It's completely insane. At the beginning of this pandemic, we saw situations where stores across the country were empty. And you remember that? Stores were empty. You couldn't buy milk. You couldn't buy things. People were filming. All the people were taking pictures of empty store shelves. You couldn't buy things in stores. Meanwhile, they go to the dairy farms. They go to the farms. They're dumping out the dairy. They're just dumping it out. They're dumping out the milk. They're burying the cheese. They're throwing out the vegetables. The fruits are rotting in the fields. What sense does this make? Capitalism. That's what sense it makes. You look at it, right? I mean, this is capitalism. When you have a system organized to make profits, you get crazy stuff going on. You get crazy stuff that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, this is just nuts. Right? And I'm looking at this, and there's all this outrage. Right? And I mean, there's stuff that these young people are doing that, is not okay. Okay? And we've seen the videos. There's a lot of things the police are doing that is certainly not okay. I don't know if you saw that video from Buffalo. All right? The guy was just walking by. The police shove him. He falls to the ground. He's laying there in a pool of his own blood on his head. But cops never do anything, right? You hear that. We all know somebody, okay? Maybe you don't, but we all know somebody. You went to college with them, you went to high school with them, you have a member of your family, or there's somebody who just doesn't think police brutality is real. Nuh-uh, my dad is a cop, and he says police brutality is made up by liberal media trying to hurt police officers. Nuh-uh, it's fake. Everyone in jail gets to play video games all day and eat really fancy food at the taxpayer's expense. Criminals have it easy in this country, and it's so hard for the police. Police brutality is made up. It's made up. It's fake. It's fake. It's fake. Oh boy. Someone said that 1 gallon of milk equals 100 gallons of water or something like that. I can't vouch for that. I'm not a nutrition expert. I don't know if you want me to talk about that more. I guess I'm not going to write it down because I can't really say more about it. But you all know somebody like that. You all know somebody who insists that police brutality is made up, it's fake, the police never do anything wrong. We've heard this, whether it's Rodney King or, that's really going far back. That's like when I was a kid, Rodney King. But more recently, it's like there's just this police brutality is not real. I've hammered this home, but I want to find somebody like that. I want to find somebody who thinks that police brutality is not real and point a camera in their face and be like, you still think that? I've heard that my whole life. I've met these people that think police brutality is just made up. It's liberal propaganda. There's no such thing as racism. I'm sick of those people. How do these people, are these people like anyone who's ever said that? Look yourself in the mirror. How do you feel now? The whole world has seen what's going on. The whole world has seen it. George Floyd, what the police did in Buffalo. So many cases of blatant murder. So many people, it's just, no. And maybe they believe it now. Maybe they're going, okay, well, this case, Trump, everyone admits something's wrong, so this case is wrong. Oh, so it is real. They need to do a double take. These people don't do double takes, though, right? I always wonder, you think about U.S. history, right? I remember reading a book when I was in 5th grade. I was reading a book on the history of the civil rights movement. It was kind of a young adult book. It wasn't like a full, formal history book. I don't remember what the name of it was, but it was about the civil rights movement in the United States, Martin Luther King and all of that. I'm sitting in the library, I'm reading this young adult book, and I read about these people that went out at the time that the civil rights movement was going on, these white people who were opposed to the civil rights movement. And they would bring bags of feces, of their own shit, to the protests, white people who did not approve of black people marching for civil rights, and they would take bags of feces and hurl them at the civil rights marchers because they disapproved of marching for civil rights. And I always wonder, a decade or two later, when Martin Luther King's, holiday is a national holiday, how do these people look themselves in the mirror, right? And it's like, they see every year that they're showing that footage of the "I Have a Dream" speech, and they're like, Daddy, were you part of Martin Luther King? Well, actually, I was one of the people who threw my own shit at him. Actually, that's what I did. I'm quite proud of my behavior. Yes, I'm a dignified citizen. No, it's just like these people are wrong, right? And like you have to wonder, right? There are certain people that just are so determined to be on the wrong side of history. It's like they can't seem to, they can't seem to understand that sometimes powerful people do bad things, right? It's like, I swear, I don't know what it is. They're like psychologically weak people. Maybe they were, bullied or had a very authoritarian upbringing. But it's like, you talk to them. You talk to, like, these people, they're sitting there. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I saw a mom with 5 kids, and she was paying with food stamps. Ugh! I see it, black nationalism, writing it down. And they sit there, and they're just so mad at this low-income mother with 5 children who's paying with food stamps. And they just sit there. They're so mad. They can't. They're just like, I can't. She's paying with food stamps. I bet she had 5 kids so she could get more food stamp money. And this like low-income mother trying to raise 5 kids who gets a little bit of food assistance from the government. She can't even spend that money on like actual things. It just makes them mad, right? They sit there and they're like, I heard that this immigrant crossed the border and got a job, and that took a job away from me, and I'm mad. And they sit there and they're so mad at this immigrant. This person who crossed the border is getting paid less than minimum wage. They just can't. This immigrant, I hate, and they sit there and they're just so mad. And then, there's a group of teachers to go on strike, right? Wanting better pay so they can feed their families while they provide education to our kids. These teachers are going on strike. They just get so mad at immigrants, at low-income families. Writing it down. And they get so mad at them. But then you say to them, hey, the U.S. government told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and there were none, and as a result of that lie, they were able to blow up and destroy one of the largest oil-producing countries in the Middle East and kill millions of people. And they go, yeah, but, Saddam Hussein was a terrorist, so it's okay. Right? And you tell them, hey, the government is torturing people. The government is actually torturing people right now. Right? And they go, yeah, but they're terrorists. They deserve it. You're just like, oh, okay. You go, there's millions of people in jail for the crime of smoking marijuana, a crime that has no victim. And they go, yeah, but they broke the law. They deserve. They sit there. It's like they don't have the ability to get angry at someone who is stronger than them. That's really what it gets down to. They are weaklings. Psychologically, they have been so trained by authoritarian parents and authoritarian society. They've been bullied. A lot of them have been bullied. And the part of their brain that would get mad at an authority figure, they turned it off at a young age, probably. They went, whoop, and they just turned it off. And they have this, but the anger is there. The anger's there, right? Especially if you've been kicked around your whole life. The anger's there. But if you've been so psychologically pummeled that you just can't bring yourself to be mad at someone who's more powerful than you. The anger is there. And so the rage that builds up in your mind at powerful people, about your life circumstances, where does it come out? You have to pour it out on somebody that you deem to be, it's safe to get mad at. You can hate the mother with 5 kids who's getting food stamps, because what's she going to do to you? She can't do anything to you, right? She's not powerful, right? You can hate immigrants. What are they going to do to you? They're not powerful. They can hate teachers, who are going on strike for higher pay, God forbid. They're not going to do anything to you, right? When they were a kid, they couldn't hate their teacher because their teacher was the authority figure. But now that they're an adult, they can hate the teacher because the teacher can't do anything to them, and the teachers, are low paid or whatever. And they just have lost the ability. They have lost the ability. Writing it down. YouTuber Hakeem. They have lost the ability to be heroic. Right? I'm sorry, but Superman, right? If you were going to watch a Superman movie, and it's we're going to watch Superman fight with 4-year-olds, would that be a fun movie? No, it'd be kind of sick, actually. You're going to watch, Superman, he's going to fight with somebody who can't walk and is in a wheelchair. I'm getting a fist bump. Thank you for the fist bump. It wouldn't be a good movie, right? The reason you go and watch Superman is because he fights Lex Luthor, the ultra-rich, evil, bald guy, the Jeff Bezos of Metropolis, right? He goes and fights this super powerful, evil, bald guy who is trying to hurt the community and has all this wealth and power and technology, right? That's a good movie. Why? Because it's a fair fight. It's an exciting fight. Superman's got his superpowers, but, Jeff Bezos is maniacally evil and wealthy and all. It's a good fight, right? Because Superman's being heroic. But these people, they cannot allow themselves to be Superman in their mind. They can't do that. They can't allow themselves to stand up to somebody who's powerful. In their mind, it's not safe. And because they've been, they've dealt with authoritarian parenting, they've had harsh life circumstances, they've dealt with, you go down the line. They just don't have the courage. They just don't have the courage to do that. And it's pretty sad. It's pretty pathetic. Folks, okay, someone sent me another super chat I may have missed. So someone repeat Sami's super chat, so I write it down. What was Sami's super chat? I don't want to miss it. Don't want to miss it. Parallel 1905. See that one. What? Inter-Parliamentary Alliance in China been established. I don't know anything about that. I don't. I know about the Federal Republic thing. I don't know anything about that. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. It's late. I'm going to bed. Thank you for something to watch in the morning. I appreciate it, brother. Well, great. Thank you, Matthew. I'm glad I'm giving you some entertainment in the morning. Maybe in the morning you can leave a comment and tell me what you thought of the rest of the live. You know, but yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, thank you, Matthew. But yeah, folks, this is a serious situation. I'm being kind of humorous here, right? I'm making jokes and being humorous, but this is a very, very serious situation. They have suspended habeas corpus in the state of New York. Let me repeat that. They have suspended habeas corpus in the state of New York. In the state of New York, they've been arresting people. New York City, mainly in New York City, but other parts of the state as well. There's protests in Buffalo and other places. And when you arrest somebody, by law, you are required to arraign them, right? You get arrested, they take you to the jail, and then they process you, and they take you to a court, and in that court, you are charged with a crime. Mainstream media covers up the more negative aspects of the protests, less on the corporate media is afraid of highlighting diversity among the protesters who have common grievances. I can agree with that. I can certainly agree with that super chat. I mean, if you want me to write it down, I'll address it later. Common grievances, media, protest. But they have suspended habeas corpus in New York. This should be getting a huge amount of publicity. It's not. But look it up. They have suspended habeas corpus in the state of New York. For real. For real. For real. They're arresting people all over the state for protesting, right? A lot of people are getting arrested at these protests. And normally when you arrest somebody, what happens is they process you. And they take you to your arraignment. And at your arraignment, they charge you with a crime. Right? So you are charged with blank, whatever your crime is. They either let you go on your own reconnaissance or they grant you bail. They grant you bail. Now, and then you pay your bail and you go free, or you stay in jail until you pay your bail or until your next court date. That's how it works. You have to be charged with a crime. They can't hold you without a charge unless they overturn habeas corpus. And that's what they've been doing here in New York. They've been arresting people and not processing them on the grounds that they want to keep them in jail to keep them from protesting. I kid you not. A judge ruled. Look it up. Earlier this week, a judge ruled that they can arrest people and not charge them with a crime and just hold them there and not process them in the jail. Because these are, dire circumstances. These are very serious times. So they're arresting people at these demonstrations right now. And just kind of leaving them there in the jail. And not charging them with a crime. Think about that. They have suspended habeas corpus in the state of New York. People are out protesting. They grab them. They just hold them there. Well, and the argument is, if we let them out, they might go protest again. I mean, this is not legal. It's not legal, folks. If they thought that they were a flight risk or a danger, right, they could not grant them bail. A judge does that. Judges, have the authority to do that if they think you're a danger, right? There's not as much of that in New York. They did rule that you can't they can't force you to pay bail for a number of crimes in New York that you used to be able to do. But if you're charged with a violent crime, you're going to pay bail, or the judge cannot grant you bail, right? But no, I mean, they have suspended habeas corpus in the state of New York. And people want to be like, well, it's necessary. No. Here's the thing. That's the thing. right? This means they don't have to charge you with a crime when they arrest you. They can come get you and not charge you with a crime, right? They can do that. That's not right. You know it's not right. I know it's not right. But again, this is what happens when society is in lockdown. This is what's happening when the ruling class feels a threat, when there's instability in society. We start to see our rights slip away, right? And that's what these folks don't understand. In every society that has ever existed, freedom has been based on a level of stability. What's the line between identity politics and class reductionism? All right. These are scary times. These are very, very scary times. That they can hold people without charges, right? We know the NDAA said that the military could do that. Bush was saying he could, if you were accused of terrorism, he could hold you as an enemy combatant. But this is something special, folks. This is really something special. There's also this antifa hysteria, right? I don't know if folks know, but there's this guy, Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, and he's a right-winger, and he likes to go get people hit on hidden cameras and like catch them doing things. And so his boast is that he went to an antifa training session. An antifa training session with a hidden camera. So he went to an anarchist bookstore somewhere in Oregon. And he went to the karate studio with them. And they practiced some moves. But he's describing this. He's describing this to, what's his name? Prager, Dennis Prager. Like he went to like the James Bond villain's like secret hideout, right? And it's like, I went to an Antifa training session and they discussed gouging of eyes. And it's like, folks, I don't know people that are activists, but there's a number of leftist groups that do like self-defense classes and stuff like that. I mean, whatever he got, I'm sure it's quite unimpressive. But the Antifa thing, like, this is the thing. So first of all, I don't know if folks are aware, but U.S. law does not have a designation for domestic terrorists, right? There's no designation. There's no list of domestic terror organizations. There is a list of designated foreign terror organizations. India imperialist. All right, writing it down. You're just piling them all in tonight. There is a designated list of foreign terrorist organizations. That is real. But there is not a designated list of domestic terror organizations. Furthermore, there is not a formal Antifa organization. There's not a registered organization called Antifa that exists. There are networks of people who go around beating up right-wingers or attack the far right. That, sure. But the actual, in terms, anybody can put on a mask and say, anyone can put on a mask and say that they're part of Antifa. Anybody can do that. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do that. Right? I remember an interview with David Duke, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Right? And he was on there, and and he said, one of the main reasons I quit the Ku Klux Klan. That sounds nothing like him. I'm just doing a Southern accent. One of the main reasons I quit the Ku Klux Klan is because anybody anywhere in the country could put on a sheet. And then reporters like you would try to hold me responsible for it. Sounds nothing like David Duke. Whatever. I can't do an impression of him. But his argument was that as a white supremacist walking around calling himself Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, there was a bit of a problem because anybody anywhere in the country could put on a sheet, and then he would be held responsible for it because he had the formal title and was in the media everywhere calling himself Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Right? And it's a bit of a problem, right? Because that was the thing about the Ku Klux Klan, right? Is that anyone could put on a sheet and say, what did they actually do? Right? That's how these things work, right? And, it's just like, there is no formal Antifa. Anyone can put on a mask anywhere and say they're Antifa, right? And, unlike that other situation I named, there's nobody walking around as their representative. There's the black bloc. I remember the hysteria about the black bloc. Before there was hysteria about Antifa, or Antifa, there was the Black Bloc. I don't know if folks remember this, but I remember North Carolina, when there were protests against the Democratic National Convention, we had many meetings about permits with the police, about trying to arrange for this little tiny march we had, during the time of the Democratic National Convention in North Carolina. I remember this. And they would always say, is the Black Bloc coming? And, it's like, the Black Bloc. What is the Black Bloc? Anyone can put on black, and they're in the Black Bloc, right? There's no formal organization called the Black Bloc, right? And it's like, have you talked to the Black Bloc? Have you talked with the Black Bloc? Have you told them not to come? And it's like, who? Like, there's no one to talk to. Like, this is not... It was really, really obnoxious. It was very, very obnoxious. I remember it was this ongoing thing, like as we were trying to negotiate permits for this parade and demonstration and whatnot. It was like, have you spoken with, is the Black Bloc? As a joke, I said that we should, there was a guy who was a friend of ours. We called him Tommy. And he had long hair, like dreadlocks. And I always said we should have Tommy put a hood over his face and call a press conference as the president of the Black Bloc and announce that they weren't coming. And the media would have been so stupid. The media would have been there, right? There would have been like 20 cameras, right? The president of the Black Bloc, Tony, we have decided not to attend the demonstration. We see, the Black Bloc has given a statement. They're not coming. So, of course, that would be fraud. You don't do that kind of thing. But it was just the stupidest thing. I remember it was always the Black Bloc. The Black Bloc is coming. And it's the same thing with Antifa right now. If you watch Fox News, you would really believe that there is this thing, that Antifa is this group of people, and there's this network, there's this big organized armed group of people that go around the country randomly finding little old ladies and conservatives who voted for Trump. Grandma is out shopping. She has a Trump bumper sticker. She's in the grocery store and she's carrying her groceries to the car. And all of a sudden, 5 guys show up with masks on their faces. And they say, Grandma, is that a Trump bumper sticker? Is that a Trump bumper sticker on your car? And she's like, I don't want any trouble. I just want to get back in my car. Is that a Trump bumper sticker? Why, we are going to beat you into the earth. We are Antifa. Bum, bum, bum. It's like, that's what you would think if you watch Fox News. That's really what these people, that's what they would have you believe. It's insane. It's funny, So here's the thing. When I was an activist in Cleveland, I knew about the fact that every so often, there would be like a neo-Nazi punk band that would come to town. And I was told by the other leftists, I was involved in the communist group, that there were certain young anarchists who would then go to the concerts and beat them up or something like that. And they told me, stay away from that. It's not a good scene. It's just like, you get there, this is, it's like gang warfare or something. It's just dumb. So, there might be an email that went out, neo-Nazi skinhead rock band is playing here, let's go. And they would always say to me, stay away from that. And they were right. It's not a good scene. Stay away from that. But to be fair, the people they were beating up were actually like neo-Nazis. They weren't conservatives. The other thing that I remember is one time, I remember when I was in Union Square on May 1st. There's a big demonstration in New York City on May 1st usually. Big May Day parade. And at the closing rally, at the end, the march starts out in Union Square, it ends like by Federal Plaza or downtown. I remember there were some right-wing people that had signs like that were anti-immigrant, and they're like, across the street. The police have them across the street. The left is on one side, the police are on the other side. And then there were like 5 young people, no hoods, no masks, nothing. And they walked over to the cage and started saying like, you're a fascist. And they started chanting like, we are Antifa, 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 something like that. It was kind of a silly chant that they had going on, and the police, were diffusing it. There was nothing going on. I remember that. But yeah, it's like the hysteria around Antifa. Now, Trump is going to declare them a terrorist organization, which U.S. law does not have. Is it possible? And the other thing I don't understand, I really don't understand this, right? Antifa, the way I've always understood Antifa is a group of people who go around beating up neo-Nazis, right? That's the idea. They go around beating up neo-Nazis. They go around beating up white supremacists, skinheads, and neo-Nazis. Now, from what I understand, in the Trump era, that has expanded to conservatives, which is, I mean, I don't believe anyone should be beaten up for their political views. I think we should have dialogue, okay? I mean, it's one thing if there's like armed fights in the streets, people have to defend themselves, but, if people that are right-wing and white supremacists want to get up and have their views, I'm going to go argue with them. I'm going to debate them. I'm not going to put a hood over my face. I'm not going to be violent towards them. I'm going to argue with them. I'm going to refute their ideas. There's been times where I felt like Antifa does these guys a favor because they make them look like victims. Instead of answering their arguments, all the media attention goes to them. Look how persecuted we're being. Oh, we can't speak our ideas without a bunch of hooded guys coming and beating us up. And the left just looks like these people in masks. And, in a way, it kind of helps the media narrative favor them. But regardless, right? In the 90s, 2000s, there was something called Antifa, or it was some kind of activity that people did, but it was against Nazis. That's who it was against. It was not against Republicans. It wasn't against Ann Coulter. It wasn't against Fox News. It wasn't against Milo Yiannopoulos. It was against the Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazi, the Aryan nations or whatever. That's who they were against. And that's all they didn't care about Republicans, right? Republicans were 50% of the U.S. electorate. They didn't care about Republicans. They were concerned about neo-Nazis. Now, you looked at a couple years ago, I went out to Berkeley, and it's like there's people doing Berkeley and Ann Coulter and Ben Shapiro, and I don't know what's going on. Is that Antifa or what? But here's the thing. Here's what I don't get. Here's what I don't get. Here's what I don't, Caleb Maupin. Here's what Caleb Maupin, myself, doesn't get. Okay? What do the protests going on now have to do with Antifa? This is police brutality protesting. This is a protest against the police state. This is anti-racism. But this isn't beating up neo-Nazis. This isn't beating up skinheads. It's not even beating up Republicans. This is people going out in the streets and marching against police brutality, the police breaking up the demonstrations, people maybe destroying where does Antifa fit into this? I'm not seeing the Antifa part, right? I'm not seeing it, right? I don't, this isn't Antifa. Anyone who puts on a mask and does stuff, fighting right-wingers can say that they're Antifa. This is not people putting on a mask and fighting right-wingers. That's not what's happening here. I mean, this is people going out in the streets and marching against police brutality, against racism, and clashing with the police and destroying property. That's not Antifa. It has nothing to do with Antifa. Antifa are people going around beating up right-wingers. So I don't understand. It's like, no comprendo. But then I live in the real world. I don't watch Fox News. On Fox News, Antifa is a group of, guys in masks who go around beating up little old ladies because they vote for Trump, I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, it's just, this is the situation we're in as a country. I mean, it's wild. It's wild. I mean, this is something else. This is really something else. People are posting about, and I mean, a number of people have told me that they've seen some of these acts of property destruction and they're false flags. I've heard that, that this is undercover cops, Asian provocateurs. I've heard that from different people. I mean, I'm hearing different things from around the country. I mean, this is a wild, wild situation. And, honestly, I think personally that people should focus on organizing peacefully, and I think that people should be following the law. And I believe in people's right to freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, but I don't encourage any law breaking. I don't encourage any violence, and I'm worried about the safety. Honestly, the fact that they are taking people in New York City right now and not processing them, and people are being held without charges, that should be a concern to any American. Where's the Libertarian Party? That's what I want to know. Where are all these libertarians that are supposed to be so concerned about freedom and the government and standing up to big government and all that? Where are the libertarians on this? Where are they? Where is Alex Jones on this? They've suspended habeas corpus in New York. Where is Alex Jones on this? Right? Where is Jordan Peterson? Where are all the people who are so concerned about freedom? I'm Jordan Peterson. I'm so concerned about the freedom. I just don't want my freedom taken away. That's why I don't like the left and communism, you see, and that's why I got pictures of Lenin all through my house. I'm Jordan Peterson, I mean, I mean, where are they on this? They're not on this, right? They don't really believe in freedom. They believe in capitalism is what they believe in. But anyway, folks, we've been going for 45 minutes here. It's about time to do the roll call. The call of roll, the roll call. I will call you out as I see you. I'm going to take a big drink of water. Names and locations. Oz Whistles is in Australia. Names and locations. Names and locations. Robert in Hawaii. Sami in the UK. Dayton, Ohio. Christian Stevens. Jenny Lynn. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Fresh Waves. Caleb. Pirate Alex in Cleveland. Dust James is in Tennessee. Auckland, New Zealand. Dallas, Texas. Dylan Small in California. Long Island, New York. Stanley Stan Lynn. Elias in Wisconsin. David Fox in Australia. Hello from London, England, says Tomas. Liverpool, UK. Charlotte, North Carolina. Dayton, Ohio. Phoenix, Arizona. Hi from Germany, says Adam Jensen. Maryland. Peru, Lima, Peru. Mexico. Melbourne, Helen. Michael in Ithaca. Niagara Falls. Default, Atlanta. Greetings from Washington. Buffalo, New York, Marissa. JT24 from Mississippi. Venezuela, compadre here. Dallas, Texas. Love from Baltimore. Shaniqua from Buffalo. Portland, Oregon. Kylene in Texas. Killeen, Texas. Jack Dundee, UK. Caleb Maupin, thank you, says Azimi. Mo from Toronto, Canada. Nate from Antifa headquarters. Right, exactly. Solidarity, says someone. Portland, Oregon. Tomas from Dago. Right? Rosie in Brooklyn. Rosie is in BK, Brooklyn. I assume that's Brooklyn. Maybe it's something else with BK. Galen in North Carolina. Pomona, California. Ezra from Atlanta. Michael from Germany. Hello, Mark from California. Mr. Red. Hi from Maryland. Arkansas. Auckland, New Zealand. David from Michigan. Chan. Memes from my dank basement. Jersey. Leipzig, East Germany. Atatis. Right? Shanghai, China. Aaron Huang. Michigan. A. Clark. Montreal. Tank Gang Unite, says Darth Buddha. Louisville, Kentucky. Dan from Iran. That's cool. Dan from Iran. Sudbury, Ontario. Sudbury, Ontario. Ugh, folks, if you haven't done so, now's the time to tweet this out. Make it a status on Facebook. Link it on your TikTok. I don't know how you do that, but figure out a way. Get people watching. Get people watching. Tucker Carlson just compared the Black Lives Matter movement to the rise of Stalin, says Tommy Faraz. Well, actually, he's right. Because Stalin was a huge supporter of the black freedom struggle in the United States. Bet you didn't know that. Yes. Stalin, right? He brought Langston Hughes to the Soviet Union. And worked with for a while. Langston Hughes was even considering helping make a documentary about the freedom of black people. They had rallies in the United States against the Ku Klux Klan and they had rallies in the Soviet Union against the Ku Klux Klan and against Jim Crow and segregation in the United States. The Soviet Union did a whole lot to raise awareness about racism in the United States. You read about the Scottsboro 9 case and how the Soviet Union and the communist parties around the world raised huge amounts of awareness around the Scottsboro 9 in that case. Stalin, Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union and the international communist movement that he led, had a lot to do with fighting for civil rights. So Tucker might be onto something. The Black Lives Matter and the rise of Stalin. Stalin did a lot to raise awareness about the black freedom struggle in the United States. And that's why, that's why people like Vosh, who equate Stalin or China with Nazi Germany, are wrong, are fools. But anyway, first of all, folks, I don't want to talk about this too much, but folks, is Vosh going to change the name of his daily streams to the Caleb Maupin Show? Every day this week, I think, at least 3 out of the 5 days of this week, someone has called into Vosh's show to talk about me. Keep in mind, I don't watch Vosh's show. can't stand it. I don't like the sound of his voice. But every day this week, somebody has called in to argue with Vaush about how he spoke to me. All right? I have not even watched these interactions. I haven't watched them because I don't watch the show. People then text me, they were talking about you on the Vaush show today. And I mean, again, Vaush, I'm glad that you are so moved by our exchange that you just want to keep reliving it over and over and over again. But this is something else, man. I mean, Jesus. I mean, we had our exchange, and that was awful enough, but goodness gracious. But yeah, I mean, his fans can't get over it. I mean, it's the debate that will not end. Goodness gracious. I mean, I'm not debating him anytime soon. I'll tell you that. I did it once, and that was enough for me. I mean, he just sat there and equated me with a Nazi because I disagreed with China and I had critical views, and I pointed out that many of the greatest organizers in the United States were tankies, and he said that's irrelevant. It's irrelevant that the first trans rights activist in the United States, writing it down, immediate reforms. You know, I mean, he says it's irrelevant. When I go over all the great people, that are civil rights activists that were tankies, that were pro-Stalin, were pro-Soviet, pro-Chinese. He just, that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. Oh, okay. Well, that's what we're talking about, you idiot. I mean, it's just, and he sits there and it's just, okay. I mean, it's like there's nothing to argue about that. But the fact that he's still arguing with it shows that on some level he must be conflicted. He must be conflicted. Poor guy. Poor guy. You got to feel sorry for him on some level. I mean, but there you go. Yeah, I mean, I recommend that if he's going to talk about me every day, he really should change the name of the show. It should just call it the Caleb Maupin Show. That way people know what you're talking about, Vaush. Truth in advertising. Truth in advertising, right? Enough about Vaush. That's all I'm saying about Vaush. There's another big name debate happening very, very soon. Very, very soon, there's a much bigger name than Vaush that I will be debating online. Another big name debate is happening. So, fingers crossed. It ain't over till it's over. I'm not going to jinx it by announcing it. You'll know long before it happens. There'll be a formal announcement soon. But, yeah, it'll happen. And it'll be a big name debate. And, like all these debates, you do the best you can. You try to represent ideas that never get an opportunity to speak for themselves. Everyone's talking about communism and Marxism and socialism these days, and we never get to speak in our own name, so... And if they do, they get some guy from Jacobin who gets up there. Oh, I don't believe in state socialism either. I just think I want to start a pencil factory where everyone owns the state as a share. That's what I want. I don't know. Don't worry. I don't want a state central plan. I mean, it's like that's the only time. It's the only time that you'll ever get to see. Socialist talk. It'll be somebody who gets up and says, oh, don't worry, I hate the Soviet Union too. I hate all existing socialism. Yes, it's failed everywhere it's ever been tried, but no, I mean, I am holding on to the tradition that raised Russia from poverty and turned Russia and China into superpowers. I'm holding on to the tradition that has raised millions out of poverty around the world. That's what I do. All right, so let's bang out these super chats. And then we can do more super chats if you want. I got plenty more to talk about, but we can keep doing super chats. Will Trump declare martial law if he loses the election? I can't answer that, Dan, and I don't want to discuss that person. Don't ask about that. But thanks for asking. I'm just not going to answer. Will Trump declare martial law? Will Trump declare martial law? Will Trump declare martial law if he loses the election? Will Trump declare martial law if he loses the election? Maybe. I mean, I would think not. But I don't know what's going on. I mean, the retired generals, I don't know if you saw this week, retired generals came out and denounced Trump. Now, active duty military people cannot denounce Trump because he is the commander-in-chief, right? It's not permitted. But retired generals have come out against him. Mattis has called him a, quote, threat to the Constitution, which we know that people in the military are, obligated to defend the Constitution. That's in their oath. So if you call someone a threat to the Constitution, you're kind of calling for their ouster and their overthrow. We've seen Mark Esper, Secretary of Defense, say he does not agree with Donald Trump in invoking the Insurrection Act and calling out the military against the protesters. There's a lot happening behind the scenes, folks. Pat Robertson, the fundamentalist, is calling out Donald Trump and saying that he's adding fuel to the fire and not helping the situation with the protests. There seem to be a lot of factions behind the scenes that are starting to move against the president. And like I said at the beginning, it looks to me like there's a fight within the ruling class. There's one section of the ruling class, that Joe Biden, that big bourgeoisie, the ultra-rich, see this as an opportunity to get rid of their Donald Trump problem. And, there's Bonapartist struggles among the ruling class. Will Trump declare martial law if he loses? I don't think so. Will he lose? Will he lose in November, right? I mean, some polls are indicating that he's doing very poorly. Other polls don't seem to agree with that. So I can't tell you. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I cannot tell you. Okay, the next question I was asked was about black nationalism. Do I support black nationalism? If, black people see themselves as a nation, not all black people do. Some feel that they are not a nation, that they are just, a community or a ethnic group or whatever within U.S. society, but some see themselves as a nation. And if black people want to organize themselves as a nation, I would defend their right to do that. I support that. Black nationalist movements, right? I mean, I have great admiration for a lot of black nationalist activists. Malcolm X, right? Probably the most famous black nationalist in all of U.S. history. I mean, dynamic organizer, dynamic speaker, dynamic writer, great, powerful person. Marcus Garvey is considered to kind of be the father of black nationalism, right? I mean, Minister Louis Farrakhan, who organized the Million Man March. The Nation of Islam does amazing stuff. They've gotten people off of drugs. They've worked very, very hard to build up the black community. I have great admiration for the Nation of Islam. And I'm proud to say that not only did I go to Iran with leaders of the Nation of Islam, right? I attended a conference in Iran with a number of leaders of the Nation of Islam. So I know them, like they know me, they know me. But I've been quoted in the final call. They've actually quoted me, and they've republished my tweets in the final call. They've quoted statements by me that my photograph was in the final call newspaper, the newspaper of the Nation of Islam at one point. I look at the Nation of Islam. I don't agree with a lot of what they say, but I'm not supposed to. I'm a white guy. I'm not supposed to agree with what they say. They're a black nationalist group. So, it's not even directed at me. They're not expecting me to agree with everything they say. They have religious beliefs that are their religious beliefs. They're not my religious beliefs. I'm not a Muslim, and I'm certainly not Nation of Islam. They have their very, very specific beliefs that are separate from a lot of different Muslim groups around the world. They have very specific beliefs. They're not my beliefs, but, and that's okay. I admire the work that the Nation of Islam has done. There's been situations where there have been gang truces that they've organized, where there's been gang fights in neighborhoods, and they go in and they organize it. They organize in the prisons and get people off of drugs. They help prisoners. The Nation of Islam does a lot of amazing stuff, all right? And, black nationalism, I have a positive view of black nationalism. I always have. I would listen to, when I was reading history, I would hear Malcolm X speak, and I liked that. It was like the power in the voice, the pride. I liked black nationalism. I'm not black, obviously, so it's not my movement. It doesn't even really matter, right? That's what Malcolm X would say. If people would say to Malcolm X, what can a white person do to support support black people? He would say nothing. And, black nationalists, generally that's their approach, is we don't want your help. So you don't want my help, you're not going to get it. But I have a respect and I have positive feelings about black nationalism. I absolutely do. And I think that when the Communist Party USA dropped the position that black people have self-determination as a nation, I think that was a mistake, personally. I think that the 1957 convention, where they dropped the black nation thesis, was a mistake. I think that that was not the right thing to do. and it caused some problems. And if you read Harry Haywood's book Black Bolshevik, if you read Nelson Peary's book Black Radical, that when the Communist Party moved away from acknowledging the right of black people to call themselves a nation, I think that was a mistake. It was a retreat, right? And then in the 1960s, yes, there was the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King Jr., but there was Malcolm X, there was the Black Panthers, there was a lot of black nationalism in the 60s, and that the Communist Party, dropping support for black nationalism, put them in a position where they weren't with the most radical forces in the black community. And I think that was a mistake. Well, that's enough about that. Okay, yeah. I saw this. There's somebody who's declared a federal state of China. Here's what I don't get. Here's what I do not get about this. There's these anti-communist forces that have declared a federal state of China against the People's Republic. Here's what I don't understand, right? I've seen this movie before, right? There's a government on Taiwan, on the island of Taiwan, which is part of China. There is a government that calls itself the Republic of China. I'm writing it down, police abolition, writing it down. I'll address that later. You won't like my answer. Maybe you will. Maybe you will. Okay. There's the Republic of China on Taiwan. And for years, the United States recognized the Republic of China as representing all of China. And in the UN, the Republic of China on Taiwan said that it represented all of China. That's how it was. Then, as we know, started with Nixon. Nixon went to China. Gerald Ford talked to him a little bit. Jimmy Carter finally recognized the People's Republic of China, right? And so what I don't understand is what now we have the federal state of China. Like, why don't they just recognize the Republic of China on Taiwan? Like, if they want to withdraw recognition from the People's Republic, why do they have to invent a third? So now we got three Chinas? There's one China, folks. There is one China. That China includes Taiwan. That China includes Tibet. That China includes the Uyghur regions, and it includes Hong Kong. There is one China. Let me repeat. There is one China. There is one China. But now, for a long time, since 1949, there have been, in theory, two Chinas. There's been the People's Republic of China on the mainland, and on Taiwan, there's been the Republic of China. Well, now, I guess some crazy, like Tom Cotton and some far right-wing members of the U.S. Congress have now decided there are three Chinas. Well, they're wrong. There's one China. Just one China. Okay. What do I think of the YouTuber Hakeem? I've watched some of his material. I don't follow him as regularly as I probably should, but it seems like some good stuff there. I haven't endorsed all of it. If there's some recent controversy around him, I haven't been following it. But yeah, I've seen some of his stuff. Looks good to me. Anyone who's on there talking about Marxism, that's what I've always said. For a while, it was like the most trendy thing. Everywhere I went in the United States, people were talking about Marxism. People were like, hey, have you heard about Maoist rebel news? He sucks. And I would just be like, guys, make your own videos. It was just like, I'm serious. Like, anyone who make your own content, right? And there's a lot of people who don't like me. I've seen that. Like, on Twitter, people will tweet out, I don't like Caleb, but here's this video he's got explaining a concept. I see that all the time. I don't like Caleb, but, and it's just, they don't want the blowback from the people who don't like me, so they're just like, well, I don't like him, but here's a video he made that's really good. I don't like him or anything. I don't play this game. I really don't. I know Jason Unruhe, right? I've never met him in person. We've talked on the phone a couple times. I've done live chats with him. Nice guy. We really disagree on a number of things, the largest of which is contemporary China, but there's a lot of things we don't agree with, and that's fine. I respect the work he does. I respect the work that Finnish Bolshevik does. There's a lot of people online talking Marxism. They don't agree with me. I don't agree with them, but I respect them. And, do it yourself. That's my attitude. All these people that complain about my content, do it yourself, right? I'm doing this. I'm on here doing it. If you think you can do a better job, do it, right? Do it. Do a better job. I challenge you to outdo me. I challenge you to outdo me. How many nations? Okay. Alrighty. The 1905 revolution. We've talked about the 1905 revolution before. The 1905 revolution in Russia, it started with Father Gapon, who was a police agent. He was organizing a peaceful demonstration, demanding, not even demanding, just kind of begging the Tsar to give food to the hungry people. He was secretly working for the police force, and he was organizing this demonstration, a peaceful march to the Tsar's Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to demand food. Not to demand food, to just beg for food. So they had this peaceful march led by this Russian Orthodox priest, Father Gapon, who was actually a police agent. The Bolsheviks realized that Father Gapon had a huge following, and it was like thousands and thousands of people were going to participate in this march. So they had a solidarity strike all around the capital. They had all the workers stop working in support of the peaceful march to the Tsar's palace. The march happened. The police opened fire on the march, and killed a number of the protesters, or the marchers. They weren't really protesting. And in response, there were uprisings all across Russia. Sailors shot their officers, and in St. Petersburg, they declared a Soviet government for a little while. And that was the 1905 revolution in Russia. People refer to it as the dress rehearsal for the Russian Revolution of 1917. Are there similarities to what's happening here? Well, there was an atrocious act of police brutality, the killing of George Floyd. There are protesters out in the street who are being met with brutality. That's inspiring other people to rise up. So I guess you could make that parallel, but it's a completely different situation, completely different time. It's a stretch. I could kind of see a parallel there, but it's not really comparable. The main thing is that the 1905 revolution, they had this huge organization called the Bolsheviks. It was a revolutionary party that was able to be involved in the revolts and push them and transform them and do all kinds of things. We don't have that here, right? The 1905 revolution started out spontaneously, and then the Bolshevik Party, which was new, which was formed in 1903, swung into action and pushed it as far as it could go. We don't have any such situation in the United States right now. We have a lot of spontaneity. We have liberals trying to turn this into a movement against Trump, and we have people that are going out and protesting, but we don't really have the revolutionary forces. It's funny. I saw an article. There's a person I will not name that they're trying to blame for some of the protests around the country. And and I see like they'll take a picture of the RCP at a rally on a bullhorn, and like, aha, we found the instigators. No, they're not. The old communist groups, the boomers who've been doing this since they were teenagers and supporting the Vietnam War movement and stuff, they're not leading this. It's communist groups show up and they show support. Great, good for them, but they're not leading this. Communist groups are not organizing this. The RCP is not leading this. The ISO is not leading this. The QWH and the XYZ, they're not leading this. Communists are showing up. Good for them. Good for them to go out and show support. Okay, but they're not. This is not a communist-led uprising. Communists don't have all kinds of people. This is a spontaneous uprising, and there are lots of very powerful Democrats trying to push it in another direction. But this is not what you think. So common grievances among the protesters. Well, obviously, police state and racism is the media covering the protests in a certain way to, emphasize property damage. Of course, U.S. media loves to be sensational. And yeah, I can see that. But yeah, there's a lot that these protesters have in common. They're angry about the police state. They're angry about racism. And I've emphasized that the police state is a threat to everyone in the United States and that solidarity is needed more than ever. And I think the biggest danger is they're trying to whipsaw the working class of the United States right now. Whipsaw, right? That's an archaic piece of technology. People don't use whipsaws anymore. But before they had chainsaws, there was a device they called the whipsaw. And it was a saw with two handles on it. And it was operated by two people. And one guy would be pushing while the other guy's pulling, and the other guy would be pulling while the other guy's pushing. Right? It's a whipsaw, and one guy pushes, the other guy pulls, one guy pulls, the other guy pushes, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? That's a whipsaw. It's an old, saw. Type it into Google now, whipsaw. That's what a whipsaw is. Right now, the ruling class of the United States, and they've been doing this for a while, a long time, is trying to whipsaw the people of the United States, right? They're saying to the black working class, hey, I understand you're frustrated. You can gain, but you got to help us beat down those, people in the red states, those white trash hillbillies. And they're saying to low-income white people, they're saying, oh, you can gain, but look, you got to help us beat down the black people. You got to do that. It's whipsawing. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to whipsaw the working class. They're going to one section of the working class and saying, you can gain, but you have to gain at the expense of this other section. They're going to another section of the working class saying, you can gain, but you got to help us gain at the other section of the working class's expense. Bosses do this all the time, right? Workplaces. I don't know. I used to work at an insurance firm. I remember, it was always, well, we could pay you more in this department, but this other department, they're so awful. I mean, they're the reason we can't pay you more. They're, and of course, when they go to the other department, they say, oh, we could pay you more, but there's this other department, and they whipsaw. They play people against each other. That's what's going on right now. They're trying to whipsaw the working class of the United States. They are going to the blue state, urban folks, people of color, as well as white hipsters, and saying to them, you can gain, but at the expense of the people in the red states. They're going to the red states and saying, you can gain, but only at the expense of the people in the blue states. They're whipsawing the country. Labor aristocracy in oppressed countries like Saudi Arabia. Oh boy, you got some interesting questions there. Turning the page so I can write it down. All right. Aristocracy. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, where do you draw the line between class reductionism and identity politics? Well, here's the thing. I don't go as far with that. Some people say, well, class takes the primary thing. And that's what they teach you. If you go to the university and you study, black studies, gender studies, they're going to tell you Marxism is class reductionist. Marxism's bad. It says class takes priority over other things. And then you talk to these people, they don't even know what class means. They think class means income level. They don't understand relationship to the means of production, workers and bosses. No. They don't even understand what class. They'll say, well, classism is one factor, and they think classism means income level, and that Marxism is class reduction. They don't even know what class means. But I don't play that game. I don't. I mean, if people say to me, well, are you saying that class takes priority over black oppression? I wouldn't say that. People say to me, are you saying that class takes, priority over women's oppression? I wouldn't say that. What I say is that with socialism, we can get closer to a world without any oppression, and that requires an economic change. But I would never belittle someone's oppression. I would never belittle if someone feels like they're oppressed and they're suffering. I would never belittle that. I'm not in that game, and I don't take that bait. So there's so much baiting going on. So much baiting. It's like I can get you to say what you really think and accuse you of being homophobic, transphobic, racist, sexist. I don't play that game, and that's bait. When someone says to you, "I bet you think class is more important than," I don't take the bait. I want to end all oppression, but the only way to do that is by a change in the economic system, right? Only with a centrally planned economy can we get to a world with vast material abundance and change all of society, right? So that is the lumpen uprising. I would say no. No, I wouldn't call it lumpen, but let me write that down. Lumpen uprising. My voice is already getting tired, and I haven't been going that long, but we'll keep going. All right. Okay, and just don't play that game, right? The goal is to end all forms of oppression, and that requires an economic change. End of discussion. Is India imperialist? Well, it's interesting. The Socialist Unity Center of India Communist, SUCI, followers of Shivdas Ghosh, who was an important communist leader in the 60s and 70s in India, they argue that India is an imperialist country, that it has an aristocracy of labor. And then they argue, based on that instead you don't have to have, they argue that, the Maoists and the Communist Party of India, they all call for a national democratic revolution or an independent revolution. They say, well, India is an imperialist country, so it can go fully to socialism. That's what they argue, right? That's the Socialist Unity Center of India Communist, SUCI. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, in a lot of ways, India, if you look at the role that India plays throughout Southeast Asia, I can see that, and there are Indian capitalists that make a lot of profits throughout that region. There are oppressed nationalities within India. The Muslim community in India, for example, is treated very badly. There's people in the northern parts of India who are treated very badly and discriminated against. I don't I don't see India. India is a middle income country. It's not an imperialist country. It's not part of the imperialist West. So I don't think India is an imperialist country. I don't buy their argument. That said, there's no reason India couldn't go directly to socialism. I mean, it has a huge working class. It has a huge industrial apparatus. I think that India could go fully to socialism. So I don't think they're wrong about that part. I just don't see India as being part of the imperialist West. I see it as a middle income country that is it's got a level of independence. I mean, let's be real. I mean, especially as a result of the Soviet Union. Mainly the Soviet Union did a lot to develop India. No one will ever tell you that. The Soviet Union built steel mills in India. It built electrical power plants in India. It had a relationship with a lot of the governments in India, the Nehru government and other governments, and they did a lot. The Soviet Union did a lot to bolster India's independence. India never became a socialist country. They called themselves that at various points. They weren't. They weren't. It was bourgeois nationalism. But yeah, India never, property relations never changed in India. India's always been capitalist. But the Soviet Union did a lot to invest in India, to help strengthen India and move India to the left. Because of that, India has a lot more independence, right? It's like Brazil is the same way. Brazil is very independent, right? India and Brazil are a similar situation. Turkey, right? There are some countries within the developing world that have been able, mainly because of the Soviet Union, mainly because of China, to have their own development and have their own capitalist class and not just be kind of colonies and vassals of Western colonialism and imperialism. But India's not a socialist country, not an anti-imperialist country. There's on some level, there's some level of independence there. Modi doesn't always do what the Western capitalists want. They have their own economy to a large degree, but they're not fully imperialist, I wouldn't say. I think that well, I've said it already. So, all right. What immediate reforms could be called for? Well, you could call for more democratic accountability of the police department, right? Direct election of police commissioners and police officers. You could call for punishing police officers for perjury, right? I mean, it's widely understood. Cops lie on the stand all the time. And anyone who knows anything, listen to what Alan Dershowitz, of all people, has said about it. I mean, the police officers, they get up on the stand and lie all the time. Police perjury. Google police perjury. It's a well-known fact, right? That if you're arrested in the United States, maybe you did something wrong, the police are going to make up a whole bunch of stuff and write it in the police report. They're going to write, you did, and they're never going to get prosecuted for perjury. Why? Because they're lying to help the prosecutor. And so the prosecutor's not going to prosecute the cops because he needs them to lie so he can lock more people up and get good stats and show that he's a good prosecutor. Right? Police officers lie all the time. They lie. And why don't they prosecute that, right? When these cops get up and lie under oath, you know what I mean? When they get up, there's so many cases where the video shows the police bold-faced lying. They never get charged for perjury. Why don't we start charging cops for perjury? If you're charged with a crime and the cops, said that you broke the store window and the video shows that you did not break the store window and the cop says, no, I saw him do it. And it's like, it's never just that. It's always, and then he turned around and said, I will not follow your rules and I do not believe in the law. And then he spit on an old lady and said a bunch of racial slurs and then turned around and urinated in public. And, they make up everything, right? When a cop does that and just lies, why don't they prosecute them? I think things would change a lot in the United States if they started prosecuting cops who commit perjury. Perjury is a crime, whether you're a police officer or not, but police do it, and it's just like they have a license to do it, and they're expected to do it. It's almost like the thin blue line. Like if they don't do it, they're betraying the other officers. Cops, they sit down with prosecutors and they say whatever. They decide what they're going to say to lock the person up. And the sad thing is, most jurors do not know this. They think, wow, he's wearing a uniform. He's a person of authority. I trust police officers, and jurors convict people on the basis of police lies all the time. All the time. And yeah, it's a problem. Big problem. Okay, police abolition. I don't think we should call for that. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, okay? And I know there's people going, groan, Caleb's a reformist. I'm sorry, okay? If you go to average working class people in the United States and you say, I want to abolish the police, they go, yeah, so when someone's breaking into my house, who do I call? Right? And they say, I want to abolish the police. Okay, so if a woman is raped, who does she go report it to? Most people, if they hear abolish the police, they think you're a lunatic. Okay? Not a good slogan. Not a good slogan. I know what you mean. If you talk to somebody who says abolish the police, and you say to them, where does a woman go if she's raped? Where does, when the police when someone's breaking into your home, who do you call, right? I mean, they think of situations where it's necessary to have police officers. You say that to them, they say, well, we want to develop a people's police force or a workers' community assembly thing that will handle those situations. It's like, so you want a new police force. Aha. That's what you want. So you don't want to abolish the police. You want to create a new police force that would serve the people. New institutions, popular power. Sounds to me like what you want is a new state, a state that would serve the people. You want a workers' state. Why don't you say that? Say, I think we should have a workers' government. Right? A government of action to fight for working families. Why don't you say that? And you don't sound nuts if you say that. If you walk around with a sign that says abolish the police, especially if you're doing it while you're breaking store windows and you've got a mask over your face and you're acting crazy, people go, yeah, that's why I want to be safe from the left. I want to protect myself from these crazy leftists. They just want anarchy and chaos. We don't want anarchy and chaos, right? When you say abolish the police, what you mean is you think there should be a new institution that serves the people and is not serving to protect capitalist property. You want a new state. That's what you want. So don't say abolish the police. I'm sorry. Don't say abolish the police. Don't do it. Don't do it. It doesn't sound sane to most people. It doesn't make sense to most people. And when people just see somebody on TV who has a sign abolish the police, they think they're crazy. Right? That's what they think. So that's my opinion, right? And you can say I don't sound radical and that I sound like a punk and all. I'm telling you, my goal is not to sound radical. My goal is to move the United States towards socialism. I believe in socialism, and saying abolish the police is not going to move the United States towards socialism. It's going to lead people away from socialists. So, forgive me if I've offended you, if I'm not as radical as you want me to be. Okay, so how many nations in China and how many in the USA? In China, they do have an official set of national minorities, nationalities. The Tibetans are a nation. The Uyghurs are a nation. There are other national minorities. Han Chinese are the majority, but there are many national minorities. And some people argue that Han Chinese is a little bit, that there's many different Han Chinese nationalities. And I'm not going to get into that, right? People in China can figure out how many national minorities China has, how many nations are within China. There is one China, there's one Chinese people. There are many different nations within it. And that is always from the beginning of the revolution. That's been one thing that Mao and others were always very clear about. They recognized the right of national minorities, right? And they promoted that. And in fact, I don't want to get into that too much. But yeah, there's many nations in China. How many nations are in the USA? Well, I definitely think there's a black nation in the United States. The descendants of slaves in the United States, they have their own culture. They have their own history. They have their own religious groups. They have their own language, their own, dialect of the English language. They live in the same neighborhoods. They originate from the Black Belt mostly. I would say there's a black nation in the United States. If black people don't want to be a nation, if they want to just consider themselves to be an ethnic minority within the United States, they don't want to consider themselves to be a nationality. I respect that. I would never try to order someone to be a nation. I would never do that. But a lot of, Malcolm X and others felt that black people were a nation. And I think a strong argument can be made for that. I think the Chicano people, Aztlan, the Sun Belt, those folks feel that they are a nation. The indigenous people, they refer to themselves as the Sioux Nation, First Nations peoples. They consider themselves to be a nation. I'll tell you one thing, there is not a white nation in the United States. There is definitely not a white nation in the United States. There is nothing that white people in the United States have in common, right? A nation, as understood by Lenin, Stalin, before that Max Weber, a nation is a group of people with a common language, a common culture, a common history, a common religion, a common economy. white people in the United States don't have any of that. You know, I remember thinking about when I was in Hamtramck. I don't know if you've ever been to Hamtramck. Hamtramck is a Polish neighborhood in the center of Detroit, right? And it's like, I think it's fully, I may be wrong, but I think Detroit like circles it. It's a separate city technically, but it's in Detroit. And I was staying in Hamtramck at that point. There was a restaurant in Hamtramck. So I was sitting in this restaurant. It's owned by a Polish family, right? So I'm in Hamtramck, and Hamtramck is largely African American, right? But it's there's a big monument to Pope John Paul II, and it's like Polish people own the stores and restaurants, but it's largely African Americans who live there. Very low income place. And so I'm in Hamtramck, and I'm sitting in a restaurant. I'm sitting there in the restaurant, and the people that own the restaurant, there's like a waiter, a waitress, woman, her father is like the cook. You know, they're speaking to each other back and forth in Polish. They got a big picture of the Pope hanging on the wall. And so the waitress comes over to me, speaking Polish, says to me, you know, very broken English, what would you like to order? You know, I look at the menu. Got the menu in front of me. The menu says to me, no refills, right? Around the country, not in New York City, but around the country. Around the country, you know, you can refill your soda at a restaurant. It says with the drinks, you can get Coke, Sprite, whatever, no refills. I looked down at the menu and I said to the waitress, who was speaking Polish, almost broken English, I said to her, it's a shame you don't have refills. And she looks at me and she says, we do for you. And then looks over at the black people in the restaurant. Like, we do for you. She's being racist. She's being racist, right? She's saying, we don't have refills for black people. That's what she's saying. Right? Classic example of racial discrimination, right? The no refills on there was, we don't want black people in our restaurant. That's what she was saying, right? And it was, we do for you, right? Classic example of racism. I mean, it couldn't get more textbook than that. But here's the thing. She's white, and so am I. Right? This waitress is white, and so am I. I'm white. I speak English fluently. She speaks Polish, so we don't have the same language. I grew up as a Protestant. She is clearly Roman Catholic. Right? Her ancestors are from Poland. My ancestors are from Ireland. My ancestors have been in the United States many generations. She might have been born in Poland. You know, she's doing me a favor because I'm white, like she is. We're both white, right? She's Polish. I'm whatever I am. I'm Irish American, Caleb Maupin. We're not the same nation, but we're both white. Right? I've thought about this many times, right? I am no way am I the same nationality as this Polish waitress who waited on me. We're not the same nation. By any common language, common religion, common, land of origin, I am not the same nation as this Polish waitress. But she gave me refills on my soda, but she wouldn't give it to a black person. Because being white in the United States just means you're not black or brown. It means you're not a person of color. It's a negative. It's like being an atheist. Atheism is not a religion. It is the absence thereof. Being white in the United States is the absence of being black or brown or a person of color. That's all that what being white in the United States is. There is no white nation. There is no white nation. There is no white nation. White people in the United States they came over in many different waves from many different countries. They speak different languages. They have different religions. They have different cultures. They have different territories. There are urban whites, rural whites, California whites, Midwestern whites, Southern whites. There is no white nation. So anyone who calls you a white nationalist is an idiot. Or I'm sorry, anyone who calls themselves a white nationalist is an idiot because they don't know what a nation is. There is no white nation. Now, Dust James, he asked, could there be an Appalachian nation? Very interesting. I know that there are different Maoist and communist groups that have raised, and maybe. I mean, Appalachia, yes, you could argue Appalachia is a nation. I could see that. There is an Appalachian dialect. There's an Appalachian economy. Some people say that Appalachia is basically a colony because of the banks that own the mines there and stuff. And I can see Appalachia being a nation, but a white nation? Wrong. White people in the United States are not a nation. I mean, it's funny, I had this conversation in Russia, of all places. I had this conversation in Russia. I was in Russia. I was speaking on a panel at the World Festival of Youth and Students, and this young guy came to the panel, and he asked me, he said, Caleb, like, what do you think of the idea of all the white Christian people of the world unifying into one country? And I responded by saying I didn't believe it, and I answered it. He got kind of upset. Not white nationalism. This is a separate thing. Well, whatever. Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, white nationalism, it's racism. It's we want to carve out an area and forcibly deport all the people of color. We want basically what they advocate on paper, those who call themselves white nationalists. What they say, therefore, is they want to take a section of the country and declare it to be the white nation and deport everyone who's not white from that territory. And that is the most ridiculous. That's called ethnic cleansing. It's a crime against humanity. It's called, it's genocidal, right? If you do that, right? If you were to do that, if you were to carve out a section of the United States and declare it the white territory and then forcibly deport everyone from that area who is not white, that's a crime against humanity. That's a war crime, right? You can be taken to The Hague for that. So, yeah, white nationalists can, not for it. Not for it. Someone says, can we divide the world based on who drinks regular Coke and those who drink diet? Maybe. There you go. Okay. It's a crazy night. Getting lots of crazy questions. Labor aristocracy in oppressed countries. No. Sami, no. Labor aristocracy is not in oppressed countries. If it's in the oppressed countries, it's not a labor aristocracy. Is there strata within the working class of oppressed countries? Sure, right? I mean, I know that in Saudi Arabia, you're asking about that the Shia workers are paid way less than the Sunni workers, that they are only allowed to work in certain jobs, they're not allowed to get education and such. Yeah, there's definitely stratification of the working class, but the aristocracy of labor refers to a section of the working class in the imperialist homelands who are bought off with imperialist super profits. That's what it refers to. So there's not. Is this a lumpen uprising? No. I'd say most of the people going out and protesting right now are part of the working class. They're not criminal elements. They're people that are, they would prefer to have a job right now, but they're not working. In fact, that's part of why the protests are so massive, is because the unemployment rate right now is through the roof because of the pandemic. But no, I would definitely not say this is a lumpen uprising. This is a working class uprising. This is working class, and it's black and white. It's young people mainly. It's primarily the African-American community, but a lot of white people too, and they're people that would prefer to have a job if they don't have one, or a lot of them do have jobs. They just go out and protest at night because it's exciting and they are committed to the issue. So no, I wouldn't call it a lumpen uprising. I wouldn't call it that at all. This is not a lumpen uprising. It's an uprising of workers, working class people who have seen their wages decimated, who are suffering in a gig economy, but they're working class people. This is not gangs. This is not criminal elements. It's not the Hells Angels motorcycle club. This is people that are suffering. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh boy. We've been going for a while here. So I've got a couple other things to talk about. If you want more super chats, please ask and I will answer. You'll always get an answer. It may not be the answer you like. Some people ask me some stuff I can't answer, and I just said I can't answer that. But I will acknowledge you if you give me a super chat. And most of the time I'll answer it, unless it's something like, somebody asked me about somebody I'd worked with before. I can't go there, obviously. You should get an Instagram account. Yeah, I don't have one. I never got into Instagram. I just never really not feeling it. Just I don't take that many pictures with my phone, and I just started doing TikTok. But yeah, just not into Instagram. Folks, I wanted to talk to you about the history of the Communist International. Caleb, look at yourself regarding your soft drink consumption. Diabetes is a big problem. I drink diet, not sugar. But Yeah, I'm actually proud of myself. For the first month of the pandemic, I didn't have any diet soda. Um, Thoughts on the African People's Socialist Party with Chairman Omali Yeshitali. I've listened to some of Chairman O'Malley's speeches. Very good speaker. Understands the concept of a nation. I support the right of black people to call themselves a nation if they want to. So on those grounds, I remember when they got up and challenged Barack Obama when he was a president for Canada, presidential candidate. I thought that was exciting and cool. And they confronted Obama about why he's not more revolutionary. I thought that was pretty neat. Um, you know, I their approach is that they have formed the African People's Socialist Party, and then for white people, instead of they formed this thing called the White Supporters Organization. That's not the way I would organize. I don't think that's the correct approach to the white working class to tell them they need to join a white supporters organization of a black group. You know, I understand that it's important for white workers to acknowledge black oppression and stuff, but I would not. I don't think that's the right approach. I'll just be honest. And some of their material, it's not where I'm coming from. And I know some of the people. I mean, I've seen them around selling their newspaper and stuff, and I think I've been to a few of their events, and their approach toward the white working class is not my approach. I don't think we should go to the white working class and say join the white supporters organization of a black nationalist group. I think we should go to the white working class and say become communists and be in solidarity with people of color and oppose Western capitalism and imperialism, and that the black workers, the black working class is fighting against the same imperialist system. I have a different approach. I would not approach it that way. But hey, Chairman O'Malley, he's been jailed. I guess he was jailed for, he did prison time for his civil rights activism, and that he was very dedicated. I think he was with the Black Panthers originally, and hey, salute to him. Salute to all the people fighting for freedom, and yeah. Okay, so yeah. I'm going to read to you in a little bit from my history of the Communist Party. But folks, I wanted to talk about the Communist International, because a time like this is a time to talk about tactics. Tactics. And that within the Communist International, right, so you had the Russian Revolution in 1917. And you had communist parties formed all over the world that were sympathetic to Bolshevism and what the Soviet Union was doing. They formed this thing called the Third International, or the Communist International, or Comintern. And it was an attempt to coordinate communist tactics around the world. And the Communist Party USA was the U.S. division of the Comintern, or the Communist International. And the Comintern was constantly trying to get the member parties to act in effective ways. It was trying to basically teach them what the Bolsheviks knew, right? The Bolsheviks had figured out how to make a revolution. They learned a lot in the process. And the Comintern was constantly trying to get communists around the world to understand the method of making a revolution. The first big book that you can associate, there's actually a good book called Lenin's Speeches to the Comintern, right? And it's very good. It's all the speeches he gave to the Communist International. Very good. I recommend it. And a lot of it was criticizing ultra-leftism. There's a book called Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, which is very good, and it's a great essay about tactics and revolution. But basically, Lenin developed the concept of what you call the United Front. The United Front. And that was the idea that, okay, the communists, the ones that supported the Soviet Union, they were not the majority current among left-wing socialist activists, anti-imperialists, whatever. They were not the majority current. There were a lot of anarchists and there were a lot of social democrats, and they were not the majority current among left-wing people. So what could communists do? What could they do? Well, Lenin called on them to form united fronts. United fronts. The idea was that they would have days of action to free political prisoners, days of action for people around the world that are suffering, days of action for the 8-hour workday, and they would go to the communists, go to the anarchists, go to the social democrats, try to have united action, united front actions with all the different sections of the working class movement. That was the idea. And they did this, right? In the Communist Party USA, they organized for what they called class war prisoners. And they fought, to free Sacco and Vanzetti. Obviously, they didn't succeed, and they were executed. They eventually succeeded in freeing Eugene Debs. They built a huge movement to free Eugene Debs from prison, a mass movement for Eugene Debs. They organized. They fought within the unions, right? When the unions were in an anti-communist frenzy, they organized something called the Save the Union campaign inside the miners' union. And communists were always organizing united fronts. And the Social Democrats, the Socialist Party of America in Europe, the Labor Party, and other things, they went into an anti-communist frenzy. They started saying that communists are the main roadblock to socialism. The socialists would say our main enemy is on the left. In Germany, the Social Democrats would kill communists. The police would all be Social Democrats. They would open fire on communists. There would be uprisings among the workers, and the Social Democrats would go and put it down. And that the Social Democrats were in this anti-communist frenzy. So in 1928, at the World Congress of the Communist International, the 6th World Congress in 1928, they declared United Front from below, meaning that they no longer were they trying to build a united front with the Social Democrats. They were trying to build a united front from below. They would go to the workers, the rank and file, the working class. That's who they would go to. They were no longer trying to build a united front with Social Democrats and reformist leaders. And they started referring to the Social Democrats as social fascists. Right? That was the term that they used. They said Social Democrats are holding back the revolution. They're killing workers. They're banning communists from labor unions. So they are social fascists. Right? That was the term that they used. Not a good term to use, but that's what they called it. And actually, there was even a song, right? I know this song because I knew an old communist who taught it to me. But, in New York City, the communists formed separate unions that were communist-led that fought against the unions led by the Socialist Party. And one of the unions that was led by the Socialist Party was called the Cloak Makers Union. And so the communists had this little nursery rhyme. They said the Cloak Makers Union is a no-good union. It's a company union by the bosses. Those right-wing cloak makers are just socialist fakers who play upon the workers' double crosses. The Hill-Quitz-Dubinskys and the Thomases are making the workers false promises. They preach socialism while they practice fascism to preserve capitalism for the bosses. Right? That was United Front from below, right? Is that the main enemy is the Social Democrats. The Social Democrats are social fascists. They preach socialism, but they practice fascism to preserve capitalism for the bosses, right? And 1929, the stock market crashed. The Communist Party built these huge unemployment councils. They built huge demonstrations, but they didn't work with the Socialist Party. They didn't work with Trotskyists. They didn't work with anarchists. It was the Communist Party, and they were building a united front from below. And they were organizing workers. They were feeding people. They had soup kitchens where they fed the unemployed. They organized unemployment councils. They stopped evictions. They organized the Bonus March, this huge demonstration in Washington, D.C. for the rights of veterans. They did amazing stuff. But, their attitude was that because the Soviet Union was big, and it was having the 5-year plans, and it was industrializing, and communism was a big current, it was their job to mobilize and expose the anti-communist elements in the working class movement. They didn't want a united front. They wanted a united front from below. That's what they wanted. After the rise of Hitler, they adopted another tactic. They adopted a tactic called the Popular Front, or the People's Front, which was different than the United Front and the United Front from below. The United Front was they wanted to unify the working class movement, but they didn't want to unify. They didn't want to, that was unify the working class movement. Days of Action, anarchists, social democrats, the whole working class movement. That's the United Front. United Front from below was We want to fight the Social Democrats and go to the workers. And then you had the Popular Front. And the Popular Front was an attempt to unify all anti-fascist forces. Seventh World Congress of the Communist International, that's 1935, they call for the building of a united front from below. They call for the building of a united front against fascism, or a people's front against fascism. And the communists had built such big organizations, and they defined themselves in the working class movement, that they had the ability, with their Popular Front, or their People's Front, to do some amazing work. The People's Front, right? And so I actually have a chapter in my book on the history of the Communist Party, the People's Front and Browderism. And I'm going to read you about the role of the Communist Party USA during the Popular Front period. So, enjoy. This is from my book, The Rise and Fall of the U.S. Communist Party. This is the chapter, The People's Front and Browderism. As the communist movement was getting larger in Europe and North America, another movement was also gaining momentum: fascism. In Germany, Adolf Hitler took power in 1933. And the leaders of the Communist Party and the Social Democratic Party were arrested and put in concentration camps. Hitler also flew to the Vatican and petitioned the Pope to call for a holy crusade against the Soviet Union. Fascist groups were also growing in the United States. In addition to the Ku Klux Klan, there was the Black Legion of America, which wore black sheets instead of white ones and allowed the Roman Catholics to join. This is the fascist group that murdered the father of Malcolm X. There was the German-American Bund, the Silver Shirts, and many other pro-Nazi groups across the United States. Leaders of the American Legion, a group of veterans, openly admired fascism. In 1933, it was revealed in testimony to the U.S. Congress that a number of very wealthy people had been plotting a military coup to overthrow Roosevelt and establish a military dictatorship. The business plot was revealed in testimony to the U.S. Congress by U.S. Marine Corps General Smedley Butler. As fascist groups got stronger while preaching racism and using violence to attack oppressed people, many people opposed them. They weren't all communists. Many artists, actors, musicians, social democrats, professors, and even some of the wealthiest capitalists opposed fascism. In 1935, the Communist International reoriented its tactics in its Seventh World Congress. The United Front from Below strategy of 1928 was scrapped, and instead the communist parties of the world adopted the tactic of building a people's front against fascism. A Bulgarian communist, Georgy Dimitrov, articulated the leaders of the Communist International. As Bulgarian communist Georgy Dimitrov articulated, the leaders of the Communist International believed that capitalism naturally moved toward fascism and war in times of economic crisis. The communists should therefore be at the center of an anti-fascist movement that could repolarize society and, in the process, move toward an anti-capitalist revolution. In order to defend democracy, it would be necessary to oppose capitalism as it moved in a fascistic direction. With William Z. Foster still recovering from his heart attack and poor health, Earl Browder led the Communist Party to rapidly readjust its tactics. With the new People's Front orientation, instead of calling Social Democrats social fascists, the Communist Party openly talked about running joint campaigns with the Social Democrats in elections. The Communists scrapped the idea of having separate communist-controlled unions, but instead attempted to join the existing unions and push them in a more communist direction. With fascism as the clear enemy, the work of the Communist Party against racism intensified. The Communist Party rallied in defense of the Scottsboro Nine, a group of young black men falsely accused of rape. The Communist Party attracted many prominent civil rights activists. And I actually have a picture in here of a Communist Party demonstration for the Scottsboro Nine. Right? It says, "Stop lynching, free the Scottsboro boys." Right? This is a Communist Party rally to support the Scottsboro Nine. Paul Robeson, the famed actor and musician, Richard Wright, the famous American writer, joined the Communist Party. Claudia Jones, a well-known Caribbean activist, also joined the Communist Party. Rather than orienting toward black nationalists, the Communist Party gradually backed away from its black belt thesis and began recruiting more moderate leaders of the black freedom struggle. During this period, the Communist Party also became very patriotic. The slogan adopted by Earl Browder for his 1936 presidential campaign was, "Communism is 20th century Americanism." Earl Browder declared in almost all of his speeches that if George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln were alive today, they would be members of the Communist Party. The training school in New York City, where communists from across the U.S. came to study Marxist-Leninist theory, changed its name from the Lenin School to the Jefferson School. Actually, here's a picture of a mural in the Communist Party office. It says, "Communism is 20th century Americanism." Right? And there's, this mural, like working people, and it's got the American flag and Lincoln and stuff. That was the Communist Party. Right? That was their office. That was how it looked. Right? The Communist Party rapidly expanded in terms of membership, reaching hundreds of thousands. In intellectual and artistic circles in the United States, on college campuses, on Broadway, and in Hollywood, it became quite trendy to join the Communist Party. Lillian Hellman, the playwright who wrote the first Broadway play to support LGBT rights, joined the Communist Party. Charlie Chaplin, the famous comedy actor, also joined the Communist Party. The strict rules of membership became somewhat relaxed. Being a member of the Communist Party simply meant attending a club meeting once a week and occasionally doing volunteer work for labor unions, anti-racist causes, and of course campaigning to re-elect Roosevelt and to support the Democrats. Benjamin Davis and Peter Cashoni, two members of the Communist Party, were elected to New York City Council. In Harlem, the Communist Party and the Socialist Party formed a joint ticket and called the American Labor Party, and they elected Vito Marcantonio to the U.S. Congress. Vito Marcantonio repeatedly introduced anti-lynching bills to the U.S. Congress to stop racist terror in the South. The bills were immediately voted down each time. In 1936, Earl Browder ran for president on the communist ticket, but urged all of his supporters not to vote for him, but instead to vote for Roosevelt. When asked if the Communist Party had endorsed Roosevelt, Browder would reply, "No, we have our own campaign, but the essence of the Communist Party's campaign is to defeat the Republicans." Despite calling on people not to vote for him, Browder still received 79,000 votes in 1936. As the Communist Party grew very rapidly, it also became internally divided. William Z. Foster and the labor union activists were very uncomfortable with Earl Browder's style of leadership. They felt that Browder was downplaying the more radical aspects of Marxism in order to recruit anti-fascist liberals. They became uncomfortable with the increasing number of middle-class people who joined the party. Earl Browder rejected the Communist International's theory of the People's Front and instead adopted his own theory called the Democratic Front. He argued that people in the United States were too backward to form an independent People's Front party, as the Communist International had recommended. Browder felt that instead the Communist Party should support Roosevelt and the Democrats. William Z. Foster, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, Samuel Darcy, and others argued instead of supporting the Democrats, the Communists should build a Farmer Labor Party, which could be part of the Roosevelt coalition, but an independent party. Despite fighting with Earl Browder, the labor-oriented section of the Communist Party achieved some amazing things. John L. Lewis of the Miners' Union led a group of labor leaders to quit the American Federation of Labor and form the CIO, or the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Unlike the AFL, the CIO had no ban on communists, and thousands of Communist Party members were hired as organizers. After the 1936 elections, the United States was swept with the famous sit-down strike wave. Workers across the United States went on strike, but instead of forming picket lines outside, they sat down and occupied their factories, holding the machinery in the building hostage. Hundreds of sit-down strikes took place in 1936 and 1937. And actually, here's a picture of a sit-down strike in Akron, Ohio, very close to where I grew up. And the rubber workers who made rubber in Akron, Ohio, they're having a sit-down strike. They're occupying their factory, and the police are going in to go after them. Very famous incident. The first big sit-down strike was in Akron. The first sit-down strike was led by rubber workers in Akron, Ohio. The most famous sit-down strike took place in Flint, Michigan, led mainly by the Communist Party members. Workers in places like California, Ohio, Milwaukee, Idaho, Kansas, Missouri occupied their factories. Because of communist influence, the CIO was officially an anti-racist union. At the famous Flint sit-down strike in 1937, when the workers marched out of their plant victorious, it was the single black worker in the plant who was assigned to carry the American flag. The CIO refused to recognize hate strikes and banned discrimination within the union. During this period, the steel industry was unionized. In Youngstown, Ohio, Communist Party members organized armed militias to prevent scabs from entering the plant. When Republic Steel attempted to fly replacement workers over the picket lines, the workers shot down an airplane with their hunting rifles. Leaders of the Communist Party were arrested and convicted in Warren, Ohio, where they were caught trying to blow up a bridge to prevent scabs from getting into a steel mill. The Roosevelt administration, seeing a huge amount of opposition from fascists, and in some instances blatantly embraced the Communist Party as an ally, Roosevelt defended the right of workers to use sit-down strikes, saying that it was not illegal. Eleanor Roosevelt famously worked closely with the American Youth Congress, a huge organization of radical young people. The First Lady's cooperation with the organization was a scandal in the press because almost all of the organization's top leaders were members of the Young Communist League. The AYC had over 4 million members and 513 affiliated organizations. It called for lowering the voting age to 18, ending the military draft, legalizing birth control and abortion. It also called for the U.S. government to boycott Italian, German, and Japanese imports and to support anti-fascists in Spain. And actually, here's a march the communists had. Hands off Ethiopia. When Italian fascism invaded Ethiopia, the communists had a demonstration, marching. Hands off Ethiopia. When Republicans launched a congressional investigation into the American Youth Congress, Eleanor Roosevelt invited communist youth leaders who were being subpoenaed by Congress to sleep as guests at the White House while staying in Washington, D.C. Bet you didn't know that. They had communists sleep over at the White House. In 1939, when the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact, this caused a huge amount of friction between the Communist Party and its allies. A number of Jewish members of the Communist Party resigned in protest. Earl Browder was sent to federal prison on a minor passport violation, and the federal government attempted to deport his wife, Kitty Browder, who had been born in Russia. Time magazine and other publications began referring to the U.S. Communist Party as communazis. We've heard that one before. But after the 1939 pact, the Communist Party began promoting pacifism. Screenwriter Dalton Trumbo published an anti-war novel called Johnny Got His Gun. The Young Communist League organized a national peace march in Washington, D.C., in which over 100,000 people pledged to never support the U.S. government in any war it would wage. The Communist Party formed the American Peace Mobilization that picketed the White House every day for months, opposing U.S. entry into World War II. Though they opposed the U.S. involvement in the war, the Communists refused to cooperate with the America First Committee, led by Charles Lindbergh and Elizabeth Dilling. While the Socialist Party leader Norman Thomas worked with pro-Nazi and far-right groups that opposed war with Germany, the Communists always identified fascists as their enemy. In 1940, Earl Browder ran for president, this time not telling his supporters to vote for Roosevelt, but instead calling Roosevelt a warmonger. The federal government banned Earl Browder from leaving New York State for his campaign, so he recorded a vinyl record of his campaign speeches. The theme of the campaign was The Way Out. The 1940 campaign highlighted the crimes of the Roosevelt administration against the Puerto Rican people and called for independence. Earl Browder received 48,000 votes. And here you have the National Convention of the Communist Party in 1939. See, they got a big Abraham Lincoln, big picture of Abraham Lincoln there. And it says democracy, right? And that's Madison Square Garden. That's their convention. And then they've got Lenin's picture there, right? And then up here it says friendship with the Soviet Union. They've got here, that was the 1939 convention of the Communist Party in Madison Square Garden. Look at that. When the Nazi-Soviet pact was broken and Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, the Communist Party reoriented itself and ended its anti-war activism. After the attack on Pearl Harbor took place, the Communist Party required all of its members to do everything for victory. The lengths that the Communist Party went to support the war effort were very extreme. The party ordered all of its Japanese members to fully comply with being put in internment camps. The party pushed for all unions to support a no-strike pledge during the war. When the Miners' Union went on strike during the war, the Communist Party declared that the leaders of the Miners' Union were Nazi agents. The Communist Party urged A. Philip Randolph to cancel a civil rights march on Washington because they felt that it would hinder the war effort. An emergency convention of the Communist Party was called in 1942, and the party was dissolved. In its place was the Communist Political Association. The Communist Political Association described itself as Marxist-Jeffersonian rather than Marxist-Leninist. Earl Browder wrote a book called Tehran, Our Path in War and Peace, and said that after the end of the Second World War, there would still not be any need for strikes. He argued that the Soviet Union and the United States would eventually merge, combining, quote, the best elements of both systems. As the war drew to a close, many communists in the United States and around the world became furious with Earl Browder and the policies of the U.S. Communist Party. Mao Zedong criticized Earl Browder in China. A famous letter from the French Communist Party leader Jacques Duclos was written criticizing the U.S. Communist Party for dissolving and for dropping any critique of U.S. imperialism during the war. The Soviet Union supported the Duclos letter, and it was circulated all over the world. In 1945, in response to the Duclos letter, the Communist Political Association had an emergency national convention where William Z. Foster and the Old Guard faction of trade union activists, including Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and Eugene Dennis, deposed Earl Browder. They called Earl Browder a revisionist. The Communist Party was reestablished. Earl Browder was expelled. The Communist Party's refounding documents in 1945 made clear that the Communist Party was a Marxist-Leninist organization and denounced the Democratic Party as an imperialist party. In 1945, the Communist Party reestablished its call for an independent black republic in the South. Claudia Jones wrote a document explaining that one of the biggest errors of Earl Browder was his abandonment of the Communist International's Black Nation thesis. One of the biggest criticisms of Earl Browder among the black leaders was that he had urged the civil rights movement in the U.S. South to stop its activism because it could hurt the Democratic Party. Browder had also argued that U.S. imperialism was somehow progressive in Latin America and had called nationalist leaders around the world who criticized the United States fascists. Mao Zedong sent a personal telegram to William Z. Foster in 1945 congratulating him for defeating the revisionism of Earl Browder. In 1946, the Communist Party supported the post-war strike wave. Workers in steel, auto manufacturing, and other industries who hadn't had a raise since the war began hadn't had a war since the war began, went out on strike and won huge victories. A general strike even took place in Oakland, California. During the war, Hollywood produced 3 films that were later banned as alleged pro-Soviet propaganda. The first was The North Star, written by Lillian Hellman, which portrayed Ukrainian villagers fighting off Nazi invaders. Another was a musical called Through Russia, which presented the Soviet people as peace-loving anti-fascist allies. The third film was called Mission to Moscow, and it portrayed the famous Moscow trials in 1937 in a positive light, with a script based on the diaries of U.S. Ambassador Joseph Davies. As the Second World War ended and the Cold War began, the United States and the Soviet Union as the Second War ended and the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union began, the newly refounded Communist Party declared that U.S. imperialism is the greatest threat to the human race. The day after Winston Churchill declared his famous Iron Curtain speech in 1946, the Communist Party convened a march for peace in New York City's Union Square. 20,000 people marched against the Cold War and in support of maintaining a U.S. alliance with the Soviet Union. That is the chapter on the late 30s and World War II from my book, The Rise and Fall of the U.S. Communist Party. I hope you enjoy it. Get a copy if you can get it on Amazon. It's available, pretty cheap. If you like it, write a review. We're all doing the best I can, and I think now more than anything we need to understand what communist leaders around the world have done. That's my text there. What else is new, folks? What else is new? Caleb, you should give some of the backstory to Trumbo. Well, go see the movie. It's a good movie about Dalton Trumbo and how he went to prison as a screenwriter. Dalton Trumbo, he ended up winning. He won the Oscar for Best Screenplay for a movie that he made called The Brave One, which is about a boy trying to rescue his favorite pet bull from a bullfight. And he couldn't claim it because he had written it under a fake name because of McCarthyism, and he'd had a ghostwriter. It's kind of amusing. I recommend seeing Trumbo. It's a good movie. I mean, it doesn't really tell you what's going on. It kind of hints at what was going on with the Communist Party at that time, but it doesn't really go into depth. I mean, you really ought to read histories. Changes in Ecuador since Moreno became leader. Yeah, Ecuador. Moreno is dismantling socialism in Ecuador. I mean, it's counter-revolution. I mean, Moreno is no good in my book. I mean, he gave up Assange. He moved some privatizations. He hurt workers. I mean, I went to Ecuador when I was 12 years old in 1999. Ecuador was in the grips of a capitalist free market crisis. I got off that plane and I saw starving people. I saw desperation. I saw poverty. Came back to Ecuador in 2013. I saw a completely different country, right? Paved roads, no starving people on the street, infrastructure built, fancy new buildings. The street names had all been changed to indigenous names in honor of the indigenous people. It was amazing what socialism did. But now Lenin Moreno is tearing it all down. And that's a huge disappointment. Yeah, I mean, it's just a huge disappointment to see that. So there you go. I hope that answers your question. And if anyone else has got more super chats, I'm happy to answer your super chats, right? You know, we can keep going for a while. I've talked about a few different things. One weird thing, you know, is I've been watching these protests that happen. I did a story, you know, pointing to some of the similarities between Occupy Wall Street and the protests that are taking place right now. Obviously, lots of differences, but I thought it was worth, you know, talking about their similarities. And that made me kind of do a walk down memory lane. You know, I was part of Occupy Wall Street. My good friend Brent Langle, that's where I met Brent Langle, and I was part of Occupy. And, you know, I think back to those Occupy days. I'm thinking I might post, you know, there's a lot of video from those days. And I might post like a highlights reel, right, of some of my Occupy days. You know, I'm in a position now where I can't do any activism. You know, I'm not an activist. I don't do any activism. I have nothing to do with these protests that are going on. I haven't even been to one. I don't want to go to one. You know, I'm in a position where I'm not doing any activism. I'm just doing my journalism. I'm writing. I'm doing news reports. But, you know, I'm not an activist at this time. But I thought, you know, since I was a long time ago, and because, you know, people might want to see it, I might post a reel. What do people think about that? Should I post some of that footage, you know, from the Occupy days or not? Up to you. I might do it if people want to watch it. Do you want to watch a reel? Would you like to see, you know, highlights of Caleb from Occupy? If not, it's okay. I might do it. Yeah. Some people, Maupin Time says it's interesting. Is that your new book, Caleb? No, it's an old book. The book that I just read to you from it's very old. I wrote. It's based on a class I gave in 2015, but it's available and it's one of the favorites. I mean, you know, Dakota Lilly, who's a good friend of mine, and you know, he's been on TV to talk about Venezuela and is kind of a hero in Venezuela for arguing with Tucker Carlson about Venezuela. It's his favorite book that I wrote, and he actually did a video review of it. He liked that book so much. You know, and so, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people who like that book that I wrote on the history of the Communist Party. It's the text of a class that I gave in 2015 on the history of the Communist Party. So get a copy if you want to read it. But yeah. Yeah. What else is new, folks? Anything new? Anything new, folks? Anything new? Yeah. Don't feed the trolls, people. Don't feed the trolls. People say all kinds of crazy things. Look, folks, I see comments go by. I don't even see all the comments that go by. I see like highlights. If there's a comment somebody made and I don't see it, super chats I definitely see. Those come up bright, lit up, but I see the comments that go by. I see all night I've been seeing crazy stuff go by. So just, you know, whatever. You know, don't feed the trolls and just, you know, whatever. Just, you know, whatever. Whatever. You know, we're all worried about the people that are out on the streets protesting right now. We're all worried about them. We're very, very worried about them. And, you know, my fear, I mean, we've already seen protesters killed. There's been a number of protesters killed. And, you know, we need to make sure the government doesn't get away with doing that. Right? We need to make clear that the government has no right to repress people who just exercise their freedom of speech. What's going on now with habeas corpus is unacceptable, right? And that can't go on. And that we need to do everything in our power to not allow a massacre of these anti-police brutality protesters. Already there have been deaths. And why has that not gotten the publicity? The fact that in Nebraska someone was killed, the fact that people were killed in Detroit. Protesters are being killed, folks, and no one's talking about it. I'm trying to be lighthearted. I'm trying not to be too serious, but that's a concern. It's a very big concern. Protesters are being killed. What's a good way? Oh, wow, it just went by so fast. There was a super chat and it went by. What's a good way of dealing with family? Can someone repeat it? Repeat it, please, so I can answer this person's super chat. You know, what was the super chat? What is a good way of living of deal with living with a racist family. My parents are fundamentalist Christians and bigoted. Well, here's the thing. I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to say this without it's gonna step on some toes here. But I'm just gonna have to say it. Okay? Just gonna have to say it. And I don't know how to say this without it's not what you want to hear. Okay? You're a communist. I assume, if you're watching this. I mean, maybe you're not. Maybe you're a random person. Maybe that's a troll question. I don't know. But it sounds to me like you're a communist. And you have this family that you say is racist, you say is evangelical, doesn't obviously approve of you being a communist. You know, I don't know your age. I'm assuming you're an adult. Maybe you're not. Getting out on your own is probably the most important thing you can do right now. I'll just be real. You know, I've got members of my family that I care about and love, but we don't agree with politically. But at this point, I've seen so many people. I know so many people. The greatest barricade, the greatest barrier to them doing great activism or doing great socialist work has been the fact that they are dependent on their family. You know, families, you know, especially conservative families, they're not going to understand this. Right? You're not going to convert your family. I know so many communists, right? It breaks my heart to watch it because it reminds me of things that I went through. But, you know, they bring their family to the communist rally or a communist convention, and they're hoping, it's like, please, I just want to show my mom and dad that communists aren't crazy. I just want to show my brother and my cousin, see, communists are healthy people. It's okay. You can accept me for being a communist. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen, right? About to leave for a Black Lives Matter rally in Melbourne. Solidarity, comrades. Black and white, united fight, says David Fox. Great, David. Great work you're doing. My hat's off to you. You know, and part of having an independent political view like you have, being a communist, that's about establishing your independence. And that also means that you need to find a way to establish your independence financially, and you need to live independently. And that the curse of this modern economy is that so many young people are stuck living with their parents. I mean, you know, and it's a curse. And it's because of the fact people aren't being paid decent wages. It's because of the fact that people aren't being, you know, properly, you know, the economy is the way it is. It's a curse, but you need to be out on your own. If you're going to be a good communist activist, I'm just being straight up here. You need to be out on your own. You need to be out on your own. It's not going to go well. They're not going to convince your family. And it's like, parents never want to be converted by their kids, okay? It's like a matter of pride, right? Parents, they're the parents, you're the kid. Even if you're 30, even if you're 40, you're the kid, they're the parents. So no parent ever goes, well, you know, I hated communism, but then my son, who I've been the parent of and given orders to for 20 or 30 years, why, he gave me a pamphlet. It doesn't work that way. And you'll be a lot happier. Maintain a relationship with your family. Be friendly with your family, but you got to be out on your own. That's my advice to you. I'm just telling you, it's not going to go well. And the more active you become, the more hostile they will become to your activism. And you got to be on your own. And the fact that it's harder now. It used to be a lot easier to be on your own. The availability of jobs and employment was a lot easier. But nowadays, it's very, very difficult to be on your own. Someone's saying I missed a super chat. Which super chat did I miss? If you're gonna be able to do good activism, you need to be on your own. That's my advice. You need to be on your own. But did I miss a super chat? Did a super chat go by? I didn't think I missed it. I saw David Fox. That was the last one. I don't think I missed a super chat. Okay. Yeah, someone said you missed a super chat. Didn't think so. But yeah, I mean, you know, and I got to tell you that, right? I mean, you know, your relationship with your family. Look, I'm not here to tell you that's something you got to work out. I don't know you. There's 200 people watching right now. I don't know who you are, and there's all kinds of people that are there's thousands of people that are gonna watch this afterwards. It always goes up. It's like 2,000-3,000 people watch these. So you all have a unique family. You all have a unique family. You all have a unique relationship with your family. I'm not here to tell you how to work that relationship. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm not here to tell you what's best, because every relationship is different. Every family is different. I'm just telling you that part of growing up is asserting that you are not your parents' child any longer. Right? When you're a kid, you think, when you're a child, you think that your parents, it's true, we all do. You think your parents are the most important people in the world, and they are. I mean, you depend on them. And they have a huge amount of influence. If your parents have a political view, you're likely to have that political view. If your parents have a religious view, you're probably going to have that religious view. When you're a child, your parents are kind of the center of your universe. Part of growing up, it's painful, yes. It's very painful. Part of growing up is realizing that the parents are not the center of your universe. And part of that is also realizing you're not going to convert them. And they might be great to, have family dinners with and do stuff with. But if you're going to be a communist and they're going to be anti-communist, you need to live apart from them and you need to do your own thing, right? You can't do that if you're a child, obviously. If you're under 18, you can't do that. You got to live with your family. But when you're an adult, if you're going to be a communist activist and you've got an anti-communist family, you need to live on your own. Hang out with your family. Go bowling with them or whatever. But figure out your relationship. I mean, some people, it's best they don't have very much contact with their family. Other people, their mom and dad are their best friend or whatever. But I'm just telling you, right? I've seen it so many times. Someone's a communist and they're begging their mom or dad or their brother or whatever to come with them to a communist event. And they'll just see that it's not crazy, that the communists are okay. No, they won't. No, they won't. I mean, I'm just telling you, they won't, right? It's just not how these things work. So that's my advice to you. I hope that doesn't come out. I'm not asking you to leave your family, right? I'm not telling you to cut relations or anything like that. I'm just telling you that to be a communist, you probably, if you're going to be a communist activist, if you're going to give your life to this, you probably need to live independently. That's just my statement. That's just a statement of fact. If you're going to give your life to this, you got to live on your own. You can't be, I mean, and this applies to married partners too, right? I mean, they might be married to somebody who doesn't want them to be active. Well, it's not going to go well, right? This is something you give your life to, right? If your partner doesn't want you to be an activist, it's one thing if your partner wants you to spend more time with them or whatever, that's one thing. But if your partner straight up doesn't want you to be an activist, doesn't want you to promote socialism, doesn't want you to be involved with anti-imperialism or whatever, and you keep doing it, it's not going to end well. Not going to end well, right? I mean, it's better to just be upfront about these things, right? And don't let these issues linger beneath the surface and get worse. It's better to just be upfront about these things. But again, when it's people that you care about, that you're close to, it's never that easy. And I know that. Yeah. So what else is new, folks? Anything else? Anything new? I heard there was a big fire going on at like an Amazon warehouse today. Did folks see that? I heard that was big. I heard that was big. Yeah. 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 What a day. Folks, say a prayer for these people that are out protesting. Highlight what they're doing. Don't let the media overlook them. And don't let people try to say this is just a movement against Trump, because this is a movement against the U.S. state. This is a movement against capitalism and U.S. imperialism. It's a movement against racism. It's a movement against the prison industrial complex. It's a movement against the whole way the society has gone. It's not a movement against one man. So don't let them try to co-opt this and make this a movement against one man, right? Because that's what they're trying to do right now. They're trying to make this a movement against one man. This is not. These are people that are out there protesting. And, one thing I will say is I am not going to tell them how to run their movement. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. I was part of Occupy. I was in the streets. I was doing all kinds of stuff. And people who had nothing to do with Occupy Wall Street other than watching it on TV would tell me, oh, well, Occupy should do blah, 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 blah. And it would irk me. So I'm not going to tell them how to run their movement. They can do what they can do. We don't know the situation. We're not out on the streets. I'm not out on the streets. Maybe you are. But those of us who aren't out there, it's not really our place to say, well, if I was the organizer, I would do it this way because I am so much smarter than they are. I mean, and it's not helpful, right? It's not. It's not what they need to hear right now. So I'm not going to talk to these people and tell them, I'm not going to tell them how to run their movement, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say the government shouldn't get away with what it's doing to them right now. They've suspended habeas corpus, for goodness sakes. Protesters are dead in the streets, folks. This isn't a joke. This is real life. This is real life, and they're getting away with this, and they shouldn't get away with it. We have a responsibility, a huge responsibility, to raise awareness about what's going on right now. To not let them get away with their huge crackdown, to not let them co-opt this and turn this into the drive out Trump because he's not anti-Russia enough movement, to not, no, we have a responsibility to not let the government get away from repressing these protesters. All the people being held without charges right now, that's unbelievable. All the people killed. There's been protesters killed. That needs to be on. Everyone should know that. That should be all over the news. That the people who killed these protesters should be arrested. You can't gun down peaceful protesters. You can't do that. Right? I'm sorry. I don't mean to get too fiery here. I'm just telling you. That crimes are being committed. And we have a responsibility, all of us, to make sure they don't get away with this. And that's really all I got to say. I'm going to go live again, probably Sunday, I'm thinking. Right? Probably Sunday I'm going to go live again. I'm going to do another one in the next day or two. It's just the beginning of the weekend, right? It's Friday night. But we're sitting here Corona streaming. We're thinking about what's going on out on the streets. I mean, I'm hearing what sounds like fireworks, but who knows what it could be at this point? Who knows, right? I mean, it's scary times we're living in. Very, very scary times. So I'll be back live probably Sunday night. But stay safe, folks. Yeah. Right now, more than ever, we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And on that note, folks, I'm out. Have a good night.